Hello, Tom Levecki here with the latest edition of the New Theory podcast. So we had a very special guest today, a friend of mine, Emmanuel, I'm a friend and everything, but I can never say his last name. Emmanuel Friedrich, is that how I said it right?
You did it right, man.
Who is, it's a good story, strong online presence, very successful entrepreneur online at an earlier age in life. Rolled it into Instagram. So we're going to talk a little bit about his journey, how he did it, and then we're going to talk about the real deal Instagram nowadays, not the bullshit stuff that you're used to hearing. Emmanuel, welcome to New Theory Podcast. How you doing today?
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here.
All right, so let's start off. So give us your background, give us your formative years, and what brought you to kind of where you are today.
Absolutely. Well, I was born in Geneva in Switzerland, which for those who don't know, it's a great place to be born in. Not necessarily a great place to live in, but as a kid, it's really good to grow up in. Pretty standard childhood. My parents just had like regular jobs. But I was really lucky at a really young age that my dad in university had a friend who was just like some random guy. And this guy, they stayed in touch, and this guy ended up becoming massively successful. He built a really successful video game company called Nova Logics, and he did super well. And eventually, he moved to Malibu and bought a beautiful villa there, and that's kind of like where he's been living ever, since a couple decades. Anyway, so they stayed in touch, and when I was around 10 and a half, 11 years old, my family and I basically went to stay at their place in Malibu because they invited us. And that was a huge eye opener for me. Cause like you can imagine, I just lived a normal life until that point.
Yeah.
And then here I am and I see this like incredible lifestyle. And here I saw this just super inspiring guy.
Yeah.
And just doing whatever the hell he wanted. And at that point, I think the seed was planted, if you will. And I was like, whatever he did, like that's what I want to do.
So
And also,
you decided to be rich.
yeah, that's when I knew like I wanted to become successful, and he also saw that like I was already really interested in computers back then, and obviously he had the video game company, so he already started like teaching me things. And then there's also that thing where it's like, well, if he believes in me, then like I can probably pull it off,
Yeah.
so that's kind of how it started out. So anyways, for a couple of years it just kind of like stayed there, just like dreams in the back of my mind. And eventually, I think when I was around 14 years old, is when I basically stumbled upon this ad. I was following this guy on YouTube, and I found this ad. I was targeted by this ad that was basically saying like, you can start your own online business. You can make like tons of money, blah, blah, blah. Like the claim was like, you can make, I think they said like $8,000 a month of passive income. And like, for me, I was like, hell, like if I can make $8,000 a month and, do nothing for it, like sounds like a good deal. I was lucky that actually this guy was legitimate, because like a lot of this stuff is also like complete bullshit, right? But turns out this guy, really nice guy called Stefan Palernos, he had this course called Kindle Money Mastery. That was basically about how to publish these little ebooks on Amazon. And back then, Kindle was kind of just starting out, right? There wasn't a lot of competition. And so I guess I just bought the course, and like most people just buy these courses and they do nothing, but like I was really into it. So I remember at the time, I think I had like $80 or something, and I actually didn't even have my own bank account, right? Because I was like 14. So I had to like ask my mom to open an account for me. It was like this whole thing. At this point, I take all the money I have, and then I have this little bank account. I basically hired the course explained how to hire authors overseas to write the book for you. So I did that. It's like short books, like 20, 30 pages, that you would sell for like $3. And so I hired a guy to do the cover. And then I put up the book. I followed the instructions. That was my first introduction to what we call copywriting, which is how to write things to sell. So I had to write a good book cover, book title, and a good description. Anyways, I put up the thing. Don't really do anything for a couple of days, just going to school every day. And I always remember on the Thursday, it was a Thursday morning, during the school breaks, at 10 a.m. you get a school break. And I always remember, because I hadn't done anything, I literally just put up the book, and I was like, you know what, let me just let me just see. Like, I don't expect, let me just see what it did. So I pulled up my phone, already had a smartphone, and I go to the sales dashboard of Kindle, and I pull it up, and I couldn't believe what I saw. I saw like 3 sales, which is
Wow.
nothing, right? Like on 3 sales, I would make like $6, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds insignificant, but it's like, think about it. I was like a 14-year-old kid
Yeah.
from behind my computer. I didn't even have my own bank account. And while I was going to class, listening to things I really didn't want to be listening to, I had made $6 within like a couple of days. And that was a huge breakthrough. I was like, if I can make $6, I can make whatever I want, right?
Yeah.
And I think that moment was really, it's like probably one of the greatest moments of my life, I'm being honest. Like it's like really emotional for
An
me.
affliction.
Like I remember I was screaming at my classmates and they were like, dude, like, what are you talking about? You made $6. Like $6 is nothing. That's like, but you don't understand. Like it's repeatable. I can make a lot more, right? Anyway, so that's how it started. So I'll, to not get into too much detail, but I kept growing this thing. I kept working on it. And eventually, I think like a year in, it was making like just maybe like $500 a month, which was really, again, like I was like 15, which is really nice. And it was also automated, right? So it's like if the work I was putting in, I had to work to make more, but to like maintain that, it was kind of like running itself to a degree. And then kept working on it. And eventually the peak was when I was around 16, where the peak months where it was making like $3,000 or $4,000 a month, which is like a lot of money. Like imagine like,
And this, you're like 15, 16 years old, right?
yeah, I was like 16 at the peak.
A lot
I
of
remember the
money.
peak month was a little over 4 grand, which was pretty crazy.
Shit.
And it was kind of running itself as well, right? Like it's books, like people
Yeah.
buy, like it was ranking for keywords. So it would
Yeah.
just rank for these keywords and like it was just making money. And I
Yeah.
remember my mom would, she was like freaking out. She's like, crap, we have to declare the money or like, what do I do
Yeah.
now? Cause she never had a business before.
Taxable.
Yeah, like taxes, like what
Especially
are
in
we gonna do?
Switzerland. But yeah.
What's up? Yeah, and it was weird too, because like the books were sold in the US, so we actually had to apply for an EIN. There was like this whole process.
Oh wow.
But anyway, yeah, I had all this money coming in, and I didn't really know what to do with it, right? Like
Yeah.
in my mind, I like kind of my goal that I formed right around that time. I was like, well, let me just like see if I can keep doing that, keep making this, and then if I do, like when I'm 18, I'll probably just like drop out of school because like I was always good at school, but I just didn't like it. I didn't really see
Yeah.
it funny, right? So anyways, at that point, I made a crucial mistake, which is when you start seeing all this money coming in and you're 16, you just get lazy, right? Like I was like, oh, like I'm rich now, I made it.
Yeah.
And so also it was like kind of automated. So I just stopped doing anything. I started like partying and like talking to girls and, like whatever you do when you're 16, right? So that wasn't necessarily my greatest decision ever. The business still kept running itself for a while, started like going down a little bit. It wasn't too crazy. And then there's like 6 months in of like these great consistent months, it like suddenly like there was a change in the algorithm of the Amazon thing, like search results.
Yeah.
And basically my whole thing completely tanked. But the main reason was just because I kind of stopped publishing new books and stuff.
How did academics come into play? Because I can't imagine
What?
at 16 years old in Switzerland or wherever you were, and you were a digital guy at the time. So like you're in between classes and the bell rings and you're like, damn, I made another $400. What am I doing here? Like, how did academics come into play? Did you plan?
Yeah, it's funny. My dad was used to be a teacher. I mean, he's retired now, but school was always very easy for me. Like, I think that's what also helped me like start this because I'm an only child, right? Like, I always had tons of free time. Like, I remember even in class, like sometimes I was like, why am I here? Like, I don't even need to be here. I'm just like, I could pass the test and get a great grade and not even be here, right? So especially a couple subject like like math I wasn't great, but there were like a bunch of subjects where like I obviously just didn't even need to be in there. So a lot of time during the class I would be working on my like marketing strategy or whatnot. But yeah, it's also like I was obviously in the right environment where I had like tons of free time and also like I think it was a great advantage to have like a really stable family. Like for example, I wouldn't come home to like a huge mess or like my parents screaming at each other, right? Like,
You had a support system. So bring
exactly.
us to 17, 18.
Yeah. So what happens at that point, I get really pissed off. So for like 1 year, I basically make very little money. It was still a little bit, very little. So that brings us to around like 17. So you
Yeah.
have to remember at that point, it was clear in my mind. My goal was like when I'm 18, I'm making like 8 grand a month and I'm dropping out of school. That was like my whole
Yeah.
goal.
That was your
And
goal.
so that we're like 17. I'm still doing nothing. And I'll always remember on the day of my 18th birthday, like I kind of like looked myself in the mirror and I was like, dude, like you're not doing anything. Like you're not getting anywhere here. Like you think you have all these big goals and plans, but like here you are just like doing like $300 a month. Like you're going nowhere. That was like a big sort of like getting pissed off moment for me. And at that point, I was like I'm just gonna cut off everything. Like I don't care what it takes. Like I'll find a way. If there's no way, I'll just make it. Like I'll just bulldozer my way into like having an online business. So what I did at that time was the one thing that I had going for me that I think made the ebook business successful was I was really good at marketing. Like I was just good at like finding these book titles that just made you want to buy the book, right? I kind of like recognized that like not everyone has that. For some
Yeah.
reason I had it. And so what I decided to do was I started seeing that there were more and more people offering um, having like online advertising agencies, what we call social media marketing, which is more like paid advertising, I
Yeah.
suppose. And that was like a big trend back then. And so I joined this little mastermind that basically taught people how to start a social media marketing agency.
Oh, wow.
And I bought a couple of courses. Luckily, I still had like quite a bit of money saved up because I couldn't spend all that.
Yeah.
So I kind of reinvested that into buying some courses about how to start an advertising agency.
Yeah.
And then also the other thing I did was I basically paid two guys who were genius marketers, genius copywriters who, made like tens of millions of dollars in sales over their career. And I basically paid them to coach me, right? Like we would have
Yeah.
like coaching sessions once a week
Oh, wow.
where they would like review my advertising copy and like help
Yeah.
me really master it. Because in my mind, I was like, you know what? Like if I can use words to sell products, I'll never have to worry about money, right? That was always my mindset.
Yeah.
So anyways, I go through that process. The first 6 months were rough, didn't go that well. But 6 months in, like I start seeing some progress. I remember I had like a month where the agency made like $1,000. And then I think like a couple months after that, it reached like 3 or 4K, something like that. So all of a sudden, so at that point, I'm still like 18 and a half, something like that. So in Switzerland, we have 4 years of high school. It was my third year at that point. So halfway through my third year of high school, I'm like, okay, like this is going the way I want it to go.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I just, at this point, I learned from my mistake, right? Like I didn't stop working. I kept going. And eventually it got to, I think after about, in total, a year after I started the agency, like first of all, I had my first like 5K month, which was like the most I'd ever made. And then what happened was I started talking to this guy. Until then, I was servicing clients who were in the US mostly.
But this is important, though. This is important. The one, how did you get your clients? And then,
So I was going on a platform called Upwork. That's what I was doing back then. So I had an Upwork profile. And basically I positioned myself as like a high-end copywriter, right? Because like you can see like where the person is on Upwork. And like for me, I was in Switzerland. So I kind of like played on that. I was like, I think my tagline back then was like, I'm the Swiss Army knife of copywriting.
I like it.
Clever. Yeah, like a clever thing. And people liked it. And I put like, you have to put an hourly wage. I put something pretty high.
Yeah.
And I really positioned myself as like an expert, if you will. And people liked it. So what happened was eventually there's this guy in the French market who was selling a course. And it was a great course. It was about how to get the government to help people buy your informational products, which in France, it's like a whole thing. So he had a course about that. And immediately he reached out to me and he was like, hey, like I'm selling this course. Like I've already made like 50 grand in sales from it, but like I need someone to create a sales funnel to help me like really make this thing work.
Yeah.
And immediately I saw huge potential in this thing because it's the dream. As an entrepreneur, this course was going to teach you how to make the government pay people to buy your products. Like it's just insane. I was like, how's this not like a multi-million-dollar business, right? And so what I told this guy was like, hey, look, I could just tell you to give me some money now to get started, but how about we do this? You give me a percentage of all the sales that we make. You don't pay me anything right now.
Yeah.
You just give me a percentage, and I'll build this out for you. I'll make sure that you actually get some sales with this. And so he's like, sure, let's go. So I built this whole thing. And I'll always remember the course was $2,000. I was getting $600 per sale that was generated.
Oh, wow.
And so we had this webinar going, and I remember the first webinar we ever did, we had one sale. And that for me was a huge break because it was like making basically $600 in a day, right?
Yeah.
Which is pretty insane. And
Yeah.
so I'm like 18, almost 19 at that,
Yeah.
well, like 18 and a half. And $600 in a day. And then the next week, I think we got like 5 sales, made like $3,000 in a day, right?
Wow.
And that's when things really took off. And funny enough, that was actually the last month of school. It was June. And I went through my exams basically knowing I wouldn't come back the next year because like the whole thing was doing so well.
Were you in high school or were you in early college?
That was high school. So in Switzerland, we have 4 years of high school. So you finish at 19 technically. Or like 19 right as you turn 20, depending on your exact age.
Got it.
So that was my 3rd year. So I still had 1 more year technically if I wanted to finish.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I was making about like 10 grand a month because I had this guy and I had a couple of other clients. And it was insane. Like I was just like coming in, right? And then so I finished my school year, and eventually I decided, yeah, like I'm not going back. Like it just kept, the money kept coming in, right? The business was doing well. So then I had to like tell my parents that I wasn't going back, and like that was a whole thing. And that was pretty crazy. So eventually we get to like September where I start traveling because I could just work from wherever I wanted. You know, business was still doing really well. But it got to this funny point where I actually didn't have anything to do, because what happened is I was getting commissions from this guy I was working with, but the work was already done, right? Like it was already running.
Yeah.
And then I had another client where it was a funny story with this guy. I basically built up this whole guy's whole business from nothing, just using my sales copy. And eventually I started realizing, geez, like without me, this guy's completely screwed.
Yeah.
So I told him, hey, like if you want me to keep working for you, like and not work for like your other competitors, like give me 5% of all your sales. And obviously he didn't like it, but he had no other choice. So all of a sudden I'm getting 5% of this guy's sales. Wow. And then I have the commissions from this other guy, and I'm just having like 10 grand a month coming in, and I have nothing to do, right? So I get to the point where I just get super bored, right? Like I was traveling to Poland actually at the time, because I had a buddy living there, and everyone I know is working. I have nothing to do. So at this point, I'm like, okay, like now I actually have time and money to start thinking about things properly. And so at that point, I decide, you know what? I already helped this guy. So this guy had a supplement business, the guy where I got 5% of the sales. Yeah. And I was like, you know, this guy's he's not that special. Like he's a nice guy, but like I basically built up this guy's entire business.
5% of gross or net?
Gross. No, it's gross.
Oh, wow.
It was ridiculous.
Wow. Okay.
It was insane. But that shows you like that can tell you like exactly how much I was needed, right? And I was like, geez, like I built this guy's entire business using my copy. Yeah. And like all he did was just put together some like random product. You know what I mean? So I was like, I can probably do a lot better job. Also, I've always been really passionate about like health supplements. So I knew quite a bit about the industry already. Yeah. And so that's when I started my company, my supplement company. You know, I had to form the whole company. And then eventually I started sourcing the products. I had to import them from the US from a private label manufacturer to France actually. And I started the company, and then I put together. So basically what I recognized was probiotics was a huge trend in the US at the time, but in France, it was very new. Like there were some products, but they had very few bacteria per capsule. They weren't great products, you know, to make it simple. And so I imported this product in the US that was just vastly superior to like everything they had in France at the time.
Was it branded? Was it branded?
Yeah, it was branded. So basically, these guys would put my brand on the product. Like
it was like a white label deal. Okay.
Correct. Like it was like a white label thing. And then imported into France. I had to declare it to the government because you have to do that in Europe to sell supplements. And then I wrote this little video where, like at that point, I think this is probably when my marketing skills were like at their best, because I was just really into it. I was still studying it like hardcore. And I came up with this idea. I learned about it at the time. I was learning about a concept where basically you don't want to start, like if you have a product, if you want to sell it to a huge audience, you don't talk about your product at first. You talk about like almost like a social issue that people are concerned about, and then you link it to your product. And so I came up with this great idea, great because it worked out, which was that I was actually going to do research about all the bad stuff going on in the pharmaceutical industry at the time,
Yeah.
because I knew it was like a huge issue, right? Like so, like there's so much like corruption and all this kind of stuff going
Yeah.
on. And so I basically spent like a month just looking into this whole thing.
Yeah.
And then I basically wrote this like mini expose slash documentary about like how the pharmaceutical industry was like this huge mess, and how they essentially had no care whatsoever for people's health, right? And that was like, I wrote this video, and the first half was like this expose, and then the second half was like transitioning into like the importance of the gut flora, the gut bacteria for like being good in good health, and eventually showing how my product was superior to all the other probiotics for gut health. And so that video took me a long time to produce, but eventually I produced it. I put it up on an ad network called Taboola, and also a couple of other ad networks. And I'll always remember, like the first day I launched the ads. I went to bed. I was giving a conference in Paris at the time, and I went to bed. I set the daily budget at like $300 a day. Actually, sorry, no, like $150 per day. I had two campaigns at $75 per day, and I woke up the next morning, and the campaign had spent $150, and I checked my like sales dashboard, and we'd already made like $800. Like it was ridiculous. And I think it's just because that video just like, it just touched a nerve, you know, like I would hear, like, it wasn't like one of those shady marketers trying to sell a product. It was like a genuine guy actually exposing like real issues with the pharmaceutical industry. And then someone who had actually created like a really good product. So I think it really touched a nerve. And I was also one of the first people to use this format to sell a product. Like those
Now this was on YouTube or
yeah, it ran. So it ran on like native networks such as Taboola and Outbrain. There was like Google. There was some Facebook as well. Like I ended up using all the networks. So, anyways, like it got to a point where I had my ad campaign. So the business immediately went from like 0 to like 40 grand a month right off the bat, which was like insane.
So that 40
But that's not even the crazy part.
Grand a month gross, correct?
The what?
$40,000 gross at the time.
Yeah, gross.
And then,
so
you know, what were you netting? Were you netting half?
Well, let me get to like, this is not even the exciting part. I'll get to the net part when it actually starts scaling.
Yeah.
So actually it could have been doing a lot more, but the main problem was like I had to cap the ad campaigns because I didn't have the cash flow.
Yeah,
like it was making more than it was spending, but it wasn't like, I didn't have like 500 grand in my bank account, right? Like I was only like 19 at the time, like 18, just turning 19.
It's cash intensive.
Yeah. So basically I just tried to like save up all the profits we were making, but eventually, so I went to, so it stayed there. I think in December it hit like 100 grand in revenue, which was really nice. Wow. And then in early January, I moved to Barcelona, and I was like living with one of my best friends at the time. Like he was my roommate. We had this like super sick apartment, and he was super successful already. And so he kind of saw my campaigns, and he was like, dude, like why aren't you spending everything you can spend? I was like, well, I just don't have all that cash, right? Like I'm pretty young. And he was like, dude, like let me get you a loan. Like you know, pay me back, like give me some interest on it, but like I don't really care. Just, you know, depending how well it does, just give me some more. And you know, he's super nice, like crazy how trustworthy he was, right? And so he gave me a loan, gave me some extra money, and now I had the cash flow. And so I uncapped all the campaigns. And so that month in January 2017, the business did $450,000 in revenue, which was insane. Like imagine like you're like, I was like 19, and I was like that month I made more than like most like Wall Street traders, or like it was just obnoxious, right? Anyway, so it's not like every month, like the revenue stayed very stable, like just the profits kind of like up and down, right? But like, yeah, that month was like ridiculous. And then, yeah, that year was crazy. 2017, Business.
What did you do for the year?
So on the year, like close to $5 million in revenue, which was like
So
insane.
you kept that
Like,
run rate of 400.
yeah, the run rate was the same. Profits were up and down, but I did net a really significant amount of money. But like the other side of the story was my money management skills at the time weren't necessarily the greatest.
Well, we'll get there. We'll get there. Now, in terms of strategies, because it's kind of what I do for a living is. So I like back then, you had Taboola, which is just for those people that don't know. When you see like New York Post or magazine online, it'll say from around the web, and it'll be Outbrain or Taboola, and you click it on the bottom, and basically the advertiser will pay like 10 cents for that click. 5 cents go to the publisher, 5 cents go to Taboola. So it's kind of like a pay click for articles, native advertising they call it. So anyway, so you're killing it at this point, right?
Yeah, it's top of the world, right?
Yeah. So my question is, did you have a strategy where you knew your acquisition cost? I'm making this up. It was, well, what was your acquisition cost per client back then?
So at the time, I was, super important question. So my CP, I had 2 campaigns. I had 2 big campaigns. I had the probiotic campaign that was always like a huge winner. Yeah. And then like a month after I launched the probiotic campaign, what happened was I was like, I think I can pull another one of these videos off. But I didn't have the operational capacity to have another physical product. Yeah. So I wrote a video sales letter for a weight loss program about a low carb diet, which was like, back then I was like really big on low carb. It was like my thing. And so I wrote this, I hired this guy to write this time a long program about the low carb diet. And we patented the sort of like the program. It's called the ROP method. And I wrote an amazing sales letter. Again, it was the same principle, right? First half is just giving useful information. I basically debunked every weight loss myth under the sun. And then the second half was like more so on like selling my product. So those were the 2 offers that I was running. So for that one, so the crazy thing about that like weight loss program offer is it was really high end. Like the CPA, the program itself was $127. There was a $200 upsell. And so my CPA on it that I was trying to hit, I could go as high as $120. And depending,
you might have X amount of people upsell, or you even cleared $20.
Correct. So like if my CPA was $120, I was breaking even. And actually, crazy enough, on some of the top publishers, we could go as high as like $60. Wow. Like that's how crazy it was. So but in practice, the CPA that I would consistently hit was around like $90. And actually, that first month in January was like $70. Like it was
so you're cha-chinging every time there's a sale. There's a $60 profit. So
$60 at first, and eventually kind of narrowed down as because there's ads.
Well, that's my question. You're okay. So for those people watching, so you obviously have paid programs, right? Which it's a simple formula. It's hard to achieve, but it's, hey, the product costs me this, right? My gross margin, and I'm willing to accept. I don't know if it's $100 program, I'm willing to accept $50 to sell it, because if you have some other expenses, you ran real lean, so your gross profit was probably mostly net. So your only cost was marketing. So did you get involved in a little bit more organic too? Like, did you do an organic program?
No, so that was something that I should have done looking back, but you just have to put yourself in my shoes. Like, imagine you're doing so much revenue out of nowhere. Like, I had no incentive.
You don't have time to do it.
Exactly. I was just running the business. But I should, looking back, I should have done it. But anyway, so that was the weight loss campaign. I would consistently hit like $90 like CPA. Then I would have like maybe like $30-$40 profit per sale. And which is amazing, right? Because you're also acquiring customers. And then on the supplement campaign, that was actually insane. We had crazy order values. And I think on that, like it also obviously depends on the traffic source, right? Depends on which publisher. But on average, we would consistently get like $160, $170 CPA on that probiotic campaign, like that we would get, like maximum CPA. Yeah. And then the CPA I would effectively achieve would be like $100, $120. So again, that same $40-$50 per sale.
Well, the supplements, you have your average order value, then you have the cost to.
Yeah, no, but that's my point. The average order value was like over $200. And then when you factored in the costs, you would get to an actual profit, let's say gross profit per sale of like $160, $170. Like, it was crazy.
Now did you mail a subscription, or did they have to go
there was an optional subscription. Basically, the way we did it was after the order, like I offered them to buy like 6 more bottles at first. And the second upsell, I was like, hey, like, we recommend to keep taking this product over the long term. So if you subscribe, like if you take this option, like we'll give you a free extra bottle, but then you get subscribed and you can cancel anytime. So it's a really attractive offer. And quite a few people, I think we had like 30 people stay on it the first month, which is like really nice.
Wow.
30% of people who said, like, basically we're like, hey, get a free bottle and you can just call us the next day and cancel.
Yeah.
But we had 30% of people sticking with it, which is really nice.
That's actually high retention.
Yeah,
So
especially
the product was
like,
good. So it wasn't like you were a bullshitter. The product.
no, the product was actually really good. Like, to put things in perspective, if someone's watching this and knows something about probiotic, like you basically have a certain number of bacteria in every capsule of your probiotic. And I mean, it's not the only way you determine the quality of a probiotic, but especially back then, it was kind of the only way you would know if a product's good or not. It's like, does it have a lot of bacteria per capsule?
Correct.
So back then, all the products on the market were like 2 billion per capsule. And then my biggest marketing argument when I came in was like, hey, like we have 30 billion per capsule.
Yeah.
And that was a killer, you know?
Well, so I want to unpack this and then not on, meaning in a bad way, because there's the other part I want to talk about Instagram and current. So to unpack it, you basically got the model down. You scaled the model, did more of a paid model, scaled it, then another product in there, better margin probably because you just selected digital, made a ton of money. So walk us through, did you exit? Did you wind it down?
Yeah, so what happened at that point is it kept running, but you know, I was working a fair amount, but I also had a fair amount of free time. So one thing that I always tried to do was like trying to think ahead. And I was like, well, like, where's this going, you know, in that 2017 year? So there's just something I could see coming. Like I just knew it was coming. I was like, this at the end of the day was still a white label product, right? Like I had no actual influence.
Yeah, there was no like super IP other than the brand name. Yeah,
exactly. Like I didn't have, my product could be replicated. And so eventually there's a company by actually funny enough, the guy who ended up becoming a really good friend of mine, super smart guy. And he essentially, he just kind of like out executed my whole model. They already had the supplement company and he basically built a funnel that was similar to mine for multiple of their products. And essentially their products, I just knew they were just like better products because they actually manufactured it themselves. And so essentially, which was actually what was crazy back then was, so they launched this, it started doing really well. Funny enough, my thing was actually still doing pretty well. Not as well as at first, but it's still doing well. And also launched some other products. So actually revenue stayed pretty stable. But you know, it wasn't as easy. And like, I knew eventually at some point, like I wouldn't be able to run, right? Like I could just see it coming. So throughout 2018, I kept running it like the first half of the year, still doing really well. At that point, also like saving money, etc.
And also really quick, to be fair, this is where, and I think I know where you're going. I don't know the whole story, which I'm excited to hear, is the game changed a little bit too. Because like you can get a Taboola, you can get an Outbrain from like 15 to even maybe as early as 18, very inexpensive because it was like, you know, Google PPC was expensive and you know, Facebook advertising wasn't there yet, but now that's becoming expensive. So like now if you use a Taboola, which is still great, and an Outbrain, they're great, but they're also very expensive. So like, you know, because I want people to like, watch the whole thing, but if you were to stop now, it's you also got to know when the hell to get out. You know, when you got to see, you know, your acquisition costs start going up and
correct
environment change. Anyway, keep going.
So there was a variety of factors. The first one is what you said, which is absolutely true. Like CPC were going up. The second one was the competition was increasing. And then actually the third one was the real killer, was France actually introduced some new advertising regulations for supplements specifically. Because of what I started, because a bunch of people started advertising it and not everyone was like ethical like what I was doing. Like some people were just making up bullshit claims. So I mean, there were even some competitors who invented fake doctors and like it was a whole thing. So there were new regulations that made it super hard to advertise. And simultaneously, Taboola and Outbrain themselves became much more strict about what you could or could not run.
Yeah.
And so it led to the point where like halfway through 2018, I kind of decided, look, we already have a big customer list, like 100,000 customers already. So I basically stopped advertising, started just running offers internally to like our list of like more to buy more of our products. And also that it's at that point where in the back of my mind, I was like, it's time to transition. Like I had plenty of time, right? Because I had like lots of savings, didn't really have to do anything, but like I was like, I have to move into something else, right? And so the business kind of like kept running and still, making good money. But at that point, I put my focus elsewhere, right? Like we just had offers running through our list internally. And that's when I was like, I have to get into something else. And at that point, it kind of led me on two separate paths that I'm still technically on right now.
Okay.
The first one was Instagram, which I'll get into in just a minute.
Yeah.
And the second one was just e-commerce. So what I realized at that point is like health supplements is very difficult to advertise, but where does my skill set lead me from now on? And I realized that there were a couple of guys who were making a killing on, again, Taboola and Outbrain, selling all kinds of like trendy e-commerce products. They had drones, they had products like that. And I was like, I already have the operations now, because at that point I had my operations really down.
Correct.
I already have the marketing capabilities. And so I started using my same marketing techniques that I was using for supplements for these e-commerce products.
Love it.
And right off the bat, I just started just killing everyone, because these e-commerce guys were just amateurs, right? And like I was kind of like a pro because I'd been doing this for years. I knew what I was doing. And so funny enough, like the transition was super smooth. I think like after like 6 months, which leads us to like early 2019, like my e-commerce offers were basically doing the exact same revenue as what my supplement business was doing, except it was a lot more lifestyle friendly because everything was automated. Because I learned from what I was doing before.
Did you ever crack 7 figures a month gross?
Yeah. So the peak in the supplement business was in October 2017, where we did over $1 million in revenue, which is like insane. Yeah, that was just ridiculous.
Wow.
And but funny enough, that it was, looking back, like it's also a lot of ego, right? Like it sounds cool, but in practice, like it wasn't our most profitable month, like.
What happens is you make that like $1 million 1 month. It's a lot of money. I'm not, and it's like, especially with what's going on in the world right now, I don't want to sound insensitive, but from a business perspective, to reframe it, you'll make that like say $1 million in a month, right? And then you say, oh shit, I don't really have the cash to buy inventory and drop ship and then buy more ads. So you pull back and you maybe make 300,000 in a month, but now Outbrain 400K. So you would have made like 300K, which is a lot of money. And again, I'm just speaking in the context of the relative terms. You might have maybe made 30,000 on that 300K or whatever it was, but then the next month been underwater 100K because you got to pay your Outbrain bill on your Amex.
Correct.
Right? Is
that it's
fair?
very complex to manage. We were making money the whole time, right? Like it was because again the CPCs were low, so I was kind of careful as well. But again, my point is like revenue is kind of, it's a metric, but there's other metrics.
I want because we're not that we're running out of time, but I want to make sure that we maximize the last 10 minutes. So keep it simple. Did you exit this? Is it still going? Walk us through the supplement.
So eventually I just shut it down after it was actually really recently. It was like a couple months ago. Actually,
kind of ran its course.
Yeah, it just kind of ran its course. And
okay, so instead of having a big exit, selling out for 5 million to whatever, you basically made money along the way.
Exactly. Yeah, and then
that was the result. And then then do you have the other stuff too, like the e-commerce, the drones, and the. Okay, so you're still doing that as well. Okay.
Exactly. That's what I'm still doing. And eventually also I kind of also made a name for myself, right? Because I became like the guy who at 19 went from 0 to 5 million a year in revenue out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So there's also like a whole reputation. Like I had some, so this leads us into like the Instagram thing, right?
Yeah,
so
and I have a lot of questions there.
Yeah. So I started my Instagram account in 2017, in the middle of the year. So towards the end of the year, I actually moved to Hollywood, which was a huge mistake, by the way. But I just moved there because it's like cool to do. Rented this huge villa with a buddy of mine, and so when we start, I had my Instagram. I don't know, back then I had like barely any followers, it was just like starting out. But so with a buddy of mine, we started organizing these pool parties, and what we would do is we were like, we wanted to have fun, but more important than that, we also wanted to gain influence, whatever that term means. So we started organizing these influencer parties where we had these pretty big, like we had a cutoff point, like you have to have X amount of followers to get in, right? It was super, again, that's why I don't like that phase of my life, because it was very, very superficial. But anyways, we would do these things. And we had all these people come in, and we actually didn't really ask them for anything. It was just like offering them value, offering them service. But like a lot of them ended up like tagging us and like saying like, oh, like dope party by like XYZ person. I mean, again, we're not talking about like celebrities. We're just talking about like influencers, right? Who had like a following in the 10 couple 100K range, right? And they would a lot of time just say like, hey, like check out my buddy, like he did these dope parties, like and I became friends with a couple of these guys. So that already, like my Instagram was already starting to grow at that time, like it was getting a pretty nice, nothing crazy, but it was there. And anyway, so that leads us back to when I kind of transitioned to the e-commerce stuff. So e-commerce was like one aspect of my life, but then at the same time, I think this is when my personal brand started growing. So what happened also when I was in Hollywood was there's so many people who were contacting me who were like, hey, Emmanuel, like you're young, you're successful. How did you do it? So I also created a program which ended up being like half failure, half success, called 21 Days to a New Life. And it was like a self-improvement program. And it was about how to turn your life around. Like if you don't know where you're going, if you don't know what you're doing in life, I'm going to give you one video per day, and that I'm going to rewire your mindset to like move forward in life. It was a $47 program. 47, I think, or 67. I can't remember. And I did a big YouTube ads campaign back then. I was one of the first guys to do like a big YouTube ads campaign in France. And that got us, I can't remember, we had like 80 million impressions or some ridiculous number. And it wasn't even that expensive to do it. And so the program went pretty big. And so what happened is there's a big French YouTuber who has I can't remember, a couple million subscribers, who did a parody video about my ad campaign. And that video is still online, still has like 3.6 million views, I think now, maybe 4 million now.
And that brought you more business.
Yeah, and it brought me crazy amounts of business, and it kind of also blew up my social at the time. And that gave it a foundation. So you add all these up, right? You have this foundation from these influencers who kind of like feature me because they're being nice. And then also remember throughout that whole time, there's always people contacting me to be like in videos or interviews or whatever. So there's always that.
Was this more collaborating to build a brand at this point?
Because in my mind, I'm like,
or are you charging people?
No, I wasn't even charged. Like I always enjoyed giving interviews. Like I like talking, and I like giving value. So at that point, also I have that whole parody thing that happens. Tons of exposure. And simultaneously, I also start having some like magazine features and all this kind of, not on the cover, right? But I would get like interviewed. There was like this whole thing. And so that was the foundation of like how my Instagram happened. And I think it led me to the point where I think in 2018, halfway, I think I had like 80K followers already, which was really nice. So that was like the foundation. And then at that point, it was just all like good fundamentals, right? Like everyone wants to know like, oh, like what's the secret to growing on Instagram? Like at the end of the day, like there's no secret. It's basically like posting consistently. Good. So you have to know what you stand for. You have to know what you represent, right? Like, and that really depends on who you are as a person. Like for me back then, I had more like the like model thing going because I was really lean. Like I was really like I had like abs and everything. I wasn't jacked, but I had that. I was in good shape. So there was that, and then there was like the whole like young and successful aspect as well, which is very enticing. So I kind of combined these two to make this like unique personality for myself, I suppose.
So to unpack that, and it's obvious, but it's not. What's your messaging, right? You were the young, Hawkeye, successful, made a few bucks. So people wanted to kind of mess with you. So by collaborating, you could have probably charged something, but then people would have been like, no, versus you said, let me collaborate. And you went from 80 to say 200,000. And now you could charge good money per post.
Exactly.
And so there's an investment either way. So I love that. Stay in your lane, stay in your messaging. But this podcast is about like, I'm like a blue collar guy at heart, blue collar family at heart. So I want to hear about like the blocking and tackling. And I'm going to throw some questions at you as an expert. And I want to get your thoughts. Okay. So let's say I'm at 10,000 followers. Let's say it takes a while to get there. And I want to go to 50, right? So number one, follow, no follow. Does that still work?
You know, let's get things in the right order.
Yeah.
First, so there's, again, like anything in business, there's strategies and there's tactics, right?
Correct.
So at the strategical level, you have to have great content. Now, I have something that's very vague, right? What does great content actually mean?
Yeah.
Well, actually, my way of defining it is something that is rare and valuable. Great content inherently is rare and valuable. Like I see all these people, for example, they want to get big on Instagram, but then they post pictures of their food, right? And it's like, look, dude, that's not rare and valuable. Like everyone can do that. So my framework when I'm posting is, if anyone could post this, like if this is easy to post, I'm not going to post it because it doesn't have value, right? So that's like the content strategy. Something you can mix in as well is trying to go for some viral posts. So I pulled off a couple of stunts as well on my Instagram, where I remember at one point I hired these 2 models in New York to do a shoot, like actually 3 models. And we did this shoot where we basically like created this scene where I was in the middle and they were like trying to rip off my shirt, and like I was looking like, oh, like what's happening to me, and the caption was like, why does this keep happening to me? And that post went insane. Like it was freaking viral, like tons of likes. So that another strategy is trying to find something a little bit outrageous, not too crazy, but a little bit outrageous that is going to make people talk about you. That's really powerful as well. Now we can get down to the tactics level, such as like follow, this kind of stuff. So right now it's actually super looked down upon by Instagram.
Okay.
There's a couple of bad things that can happen. I mean, first of all, if it's abuse, they can restrict your account where like for 7 days you can't follow anyone or something like that. And the second thing is actually, if you follow too many people, this is actually, by the way, this is just a theory of mine. The first part is for sure. The second part, it's not proven, but it's just something that I think happens because like some buddies of mine have told me about it. If you follow too many people and you do it too fast, like the algorithm is basically like, okay, this is like spammy, So I think a little bit is okay. I wouldn't do more than like 20 per day, like follow.
I would give you, so I'm not at your level of social marketing. We do more social media marketing where we use it for patient or client acquisition for our clients. So we're more into and I'm not knocking anybody, but we're more as historically worked for the dough, not the show. So our model has historically been just get clients via this, not worry about followers. But then we're realizing that the show brings the dough. So now we realize, step it up. So my direction has always been, back in the day it was 250, but don't follow more than 50 a day. But I like yours saying don't follow more than 20. So
I would do 20. I think Instagram is getting wiser. At the same time, they also don't really care as long as you're not like spamming people,
Now, do you? Hey, I follow my 20 organically and I move on. When I circle back, if they don't follow back, I disengage.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I like. Okay, so you're really. I love. Okay.
Yeah. And you can automate that, by the way. I would totally automate it for sure.
Got number 2. Now, whether we like it or not, and you can answer a backup question if you feel differently. The reason why Zuckerberg has a whole shit ton of money is they're basically forcing you to boost your page now. Like there was follow, shout outs. There's a whole bunch of shit you can do, and you can scale from 10,000 to 50,000 in over 6 weeks in a white hat fashion, done in a right way, right? Now I'm just noticing, kind of like you with Taboola and everything else, you got to have it. You got to pay for it, right? So my question to you is, what's an expectation if I were to throw $100 a day, $200 a day, $500 a day, whatever it is, just on awareness? what would you want to acquire a follower for in cents, not a dollar?
As a as you obviously know, there's no campaign where the campaign goal is followers, right? Which is
Correct.
actually
Which
it's
sucks.
actually
Which sucks, by
surprising.
the way. Which
Yeah,
sucks.
it's super surprising. Like I don't see why they wouldn't do that.
Correct.
But what you can do is there's a couple things. I mean, you could do like Instagram ads for it.
Yeah.
Potentially you could do YouTube ads as well, where you lead people to the actual Instagram page as
As a
well.
funnel, almost like a funnel
Yeah,
for old school. Because it'd be
exactly.
cheaper to get the view and then bring them in. I've done that with Twitter, and I actually
Yep.
got cheaper followers per follower that was targeted through Twitter campaign than I did for Instagram. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, you have to separate. There's two kinds of campaigns, right? There's campaigns where you just want to grow the accounts. You don't really care
Awareness.
about the actual followers. If
Correct.
that's the case, I mean, a very well-used strategy is, I personally haven't used it, but it is used by tons of people, is like you just go to like India or like third world countries. And actually, like I know there's a buddy of mine who uses that whenever he starts a business, he just creates a Facebook page and he creates like likes ads and targets it to third world countries, and he gets the page up to like good likes pretty quickly.
And
And
they're
it's like
real.
real,
They're
right?
just out of pocket.
What's up?
They're real. They're just out of pocket. They're real.
Yeah,
They're real.
like basically they're not going to buy, but they're going to interact with your posts, you
Yeah.
know? So if you just want to, because then again, it's like social proof, and like then you're also likely to attract actual people who are in your target market. So that's a viable strategy. And then if you want targeted, then obviously you target US or whatever country you're in. And at that point, you have to get into like providing value and, you know, all the
But
traditional.
I want to. So I told you, like, we're very like, what was a blue collar guy. I wish I have a shovel in my hand right now. I want to know details. What are you comfortable with? Let's just say, sake of argument.
I've never advertised my Instagram. I've never paid.
Okay, so you did the opposite for Instagram. You were paid for play on the attraction of e-commerce, right?
Exactly.
On your
Yeah, my e-commerce is completely separate from my Instagram. Like it's not linked. Like my e-commerce business, like I run all kinds of products. Some of them my own, some of them I have partners who run them. Like it's like a separate division of my business. My Instagram started out by having a lot of organic sort of traffic incoming. And the thing that happened, the thing that's great about, it's good and bad. The thing that's good and bad about social media is it's hard to start, right? It's hard to get the thing going. But when you have an audience, it's amazing to leverage that audience to grow it. And that's what I did, right? Like I already had a following of people who were like, this guy's cool, you know, because they found out about me through one of the various means we've talked about.
Okay.
And then all that I did was just post really good or unique content, some of it viral, some of it not. And that's kind of how it grew. And also doing some collabs with some fellow people that I'm friends with.
So content strategy, and then execution, and then whatever works, wash, rinse, and repeat.
Correct.
Now,
However, what I will say, just the reason why I was answering your question is because I know it's a viable strategy to advertise to get your Instagram up. I mean, I can't tell you what's the exact number you should look for because, again, I personally haven't done it. But then again, it depends on the quality of the followers, and it depends on the strategy as well.
Got it. Now, what about what's the real deal on getting a blue check mark on IG nowadays?
I mean, I have a friend who basically it's just about press.
Okay,
So
I was told that.
yeah, so number of followers completely irrelevant. Like I have friends who have like 500 followers and they're verified. It's all about like the press that you've had. So it's basically super simple. Like you need to have press in very reputable publications. So like in the US, it would be like Forbes, New York Times, New York Post.
I was told like 15. Like I was, and again, I'm just giving you, you know, as a digital marketer, I'm not an expert on social media per se. I'm more of an SEM guy, and then subset social media, and I work with people that are experts. But I was told 15. Like if I go to Google News and I type in Emmanuel Heinrich, right? I always mess up his name. You need 15 tier 1 pieces or 15 tier 1 or 2 pieces in Google News if I type in my name. Does that sound about right?
Google News, but it's not even about the Google results. Like you could type, like I have some friends who are verified. You could type their name, you won't find anything. But for example,
what I mean is Google News, meaning I go to the news tab, right? And I come up in news publications, Forbes, another tier
No,
one.
I understand, but it doesn't have to be that. It just has to be like links to the articles, whether or not like you find them on Google. It doesn't really
Oh,
matter.
I got. Okay, so if I'm looking to get a client a blue check mark, white hat, um, um,
So the first step is you need the press,
yeah,
right? Like you need to have, I would say, like at least 5 or 10 articles in different reputable publications.
okay,
And it can't just be about like one thing, right? Like it has to be multiple articles.
yeah,
And then once you have those, then you just need to work with like an Instagram, like a Facebook partner. Like
yeah.
a lot of agencies have that, like some PR agencies have that. And then they can basically just like submit your profile to get verified. Again, like a lot of people, they're crazy about the second step. They're like, oh, like I just need to find the agency. But it's like, dude, like if you don't have the press, they can submit it all they want and nothing's gonna happen.
And a Facebook partner is because I do Facebook ads, right? But I just do them through Boost because we just
No,
spend
no, no.
that.
It's a very specific thing. Like Facebook partners are like they take specific courses, and it's like
Yeah,
they
yeah,
spend
it's
a
like a
certain amount of
Google
money.
partner type thing. Got it.
Exactly.
Now, okay, so some press, possible face because they have a relationship on the ad side, and they say, hey, check this person out. It's about relationships, so that makes sense. What about I know I'm just laying everything out here, so we're a very transparent podcast. I was told make a fake account with your name, 2 or 3 of them, keep reporting them because if you run the risk of imitation,
No,
it's a better chance to verify it. So the answer to
no,
that is
no.
no.
That's no.
Okay. The other thing is I have somebody else had on the podcast. I won't say who. It's over 200 guests who got check mark verified back alley for $2,500 guaranteed. Stay away from that too, or is that if
Oh,
hey?
that's super shady. I mean,
I'm just
look, I
asking.
don't know, but that sounds super shady.
I'm not listen. I don't judge. I'm like a ball where
No,
live.
I don't judge either, but it doesn't sound like something that would work.
Got it.
So,
Got it. Okay, I had one more question, and then I will kind of hear what you're working on next. Um, so we talked about we talked about the follow no follow. We talked about should you buy, maybe boost a little bit. So you kind of touched on it, but let's just say again, I want to grow our Instagram. We do a Bitly, we link to Instagram, so follow us on Instagram. You know the apps, you click it, so go to Instagram. Give us you said YouTube, so I'll acknowledge that. Give us 1 or 2 more platforms you would use other than Instagram to drive Instagram growth that may be cheaper than Instagram.
I mean, I was gonna say Facebook. I don't think Facebook's gonna be cheaper. Facebook might be higher quality for
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
Um, YouTube would be great. Other than that, I mean, I think also working with influencers directly is a great way. Like, if you see someone has a following that you like, just tell them, hey, promote us, like we'll pay you XYZ. I mean, it depends on the influencer, depends how it's done, but like it's definitely a good way to do it as well.
Okay, so here's how I do it as a marketer because I have a budget and it is my money in a sense because our clients' money. I like to offer I think it was $10 for every real 1,000 if it's generic, and if it's super nichey, $25 for every real 1,000.
But wait, then this is just like buying followers online, right? Those are never.
No. What I'm getting at is if you approach me and you have 100,000 followers, and I'll say, okay, I'll start off at $1,000, but then I'll look at their real engagement, not their fake engagement. And there's some tools, how many fakes. So let's just take an argument. If they turn around and it says 40% fake on tools they have, I'll say, great, 60,000 are real. For $10, 1,000, I'll offer them $600.
Oh, depending on
Yeah.
their follower. Okay. I
Sorry,
thought
yeah,
you were like, I
I'm
thought you wanted to pay $25 to get 1,000
Yeah,
followers.
so
And I was
give
like, oh, like,
me, you call somebody up or you DM them out. You call them old. You DM somebody. Hey, Emmanuel, I want to do a shout for a shout. And they look at you like, get out of here. You got 10,000. Go kick rocks. But I get this per post, right? And they throw a huge number out there. Give me your formula of what we should pay.
I haven't done it myself. So I'm
Okay.
just saying things that I've heard about. I've only grown it organically. Like I haven't
No, but
paid.
what I'm getting at is you're saying do a shout for shout, right? In the beginning, until your comparable account, the influencer is going to hit you with a bill.
But
how
I've never paid them. I've only ever done it with like friends. Like it's not even like I've cold DM'd people like, hey, do you want to do a chat? Like it's just I have some friends who have like followers. It could be more, it could be less, and we just kind of like we just goof around and we
now
like
are you
speak to each other.
are you okay with, I'm making this up, somebody has 100,000 followers, I find out 60,000 are real, I'm comfortable paying $500 for it, whatever I budget for it, I would do my numbers. Do you like the paid shout outs, or you're like, you know what, Tom, save your money and use it for other things? Where do you stand on the paid shout
No,
outs?
I like paid shout outs. I think it's a vibe. Like I was actually talking to a buddy of mine the other day and like that's how he likes to do it. So it's definitely a viable strategy. I think it's even better because like native, it's within the like native on the platform, you know. So it's like they're already following someone, so they're quite likely to follow
What
someone
should
else.
you expect? Let's say they have 100,000 real followers and you partner with them, whether paid or not. And you know this, and I just want to give a background. Back in the day, you had a shout out from 100,000, you'd have 5 to 8,000 come in pre-algorithm debacle, right? Nowadays, it's much different. So, what would you expect on, let's say, a real 100,000 blue check
I
mark
haven't
person?
done it. It depends on a million factors. Like it
Got
depends
it.
how linked it is, depends like what's the actual shout out. Yeah, it depends how related the audiences are, depends like the time of the day, depends on like is it mostly males or females? I could be like it could be like 200 or it could be like 2000, you know.
Love it. All right. So, what are you working on now?
So at the moment, actually, I'm currently buying a new supplement business, which is pretty exciting, which is a US company. And it's actually a guy that I've done business with that guy before. And he has some really cool products. So I'm pretty excited about that. Yeah, otherwise just, you know, always selling products on native,
Love.
running cool offers and crushing it online.
Well, we'll put your Instagram link below. So what's your, I want to throw some fun question at you. What's your FU number? What number did you, if you know, like we all have an FU number, at least I do. And FU reminds me, it's so low, it's scary. It used to be much higher, but it's so low. What's your FU number that if you get to, you're like, you know what, I'll still do what I'm doing, but I'm like, you know what, I'm FU.
Yeah, I don't really care. My FU number has always been $25 million.
Oh,
It's
wow, nice.
super clear because I know if you invest 25 million bucks and you just put it in like a random mutual fund, completely diversified after taxes, you get like
4%, you're making $1 million a year.
exactly you're making $1 million a year. So
I love it, dude. Emmanuel, this is great. I love the realness of it. I love the story. I love the arc. I love everything that you're doing. And it's a disclosure. We are friends. We've done a little business together. But I want people that I do business together so I can speak to openly and give some the real story. And that's what New Theory Podcast is about. So, Emmanuel, thank you for being on the New Theory Podcast. And
appreciate it.
I want to hear when you launch that supplement company because we want to hear the strategy.
Absolutely.
And wish you the best of success.
Same for you. Yeah. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I hope I could inspire someone, at least one person. You know, it's always the goal.
Love it, brother. Be good.